Well, I don't know what you think, but it feels to me like it's been a while since we last saw each other. Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. We're back together on a day with absolutely gorgeous weather, sunshine, perfect temperature, to try out a machine that a lot of you have asked me to review. And I'm really happy to be able to bring it to you today. By the way, I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the bike first, otherwise I'll end up with a dead battery. This is the CFMoto SRK 800 Dark. So this bike comes after the test ride of the SRK 921. But just a little tip, this is actually the first bike I picked up from the Horse Motors dealership in Pierre-Laye. And actually, this video is a collaboration, just like the last one, with SIMA, the official importer of CFMoto, who very kindly reached out to ask if I wanted to test these bikes and tell you about them. And it's super exciting for me to be able to bring this to you. Quite simply because CFMoto, I've already told you about them, is a brand that's constantly growing. They broke into the top 20 manufacturers with the most sales in France in 2025. And in my opinion, they're nowhere near done, especially with the crazy lineup they've got. So you have all the information you need. Let's get right into it and talk about this bike, which is, well, positioned as the entry-level model among the SRK 800s, because there are actually two versions of the 800. There's the standard 800, the one that doesn't necessarily have an acronym in front of the number. And then there's the 800 Dark, which is this model right here. Basically, what sets the 800 Dark apart from the standard 800? There are several things, especially the fact that it uses a cable throttle instead of ride-by-wire, which changes the riding modes a bit. I'll talk to you about that in just a moment. It has an upshifter, but not an up and down shifter. And overall, that's pretty much it. And the price point is going to be really interesting, but we'll talk about that later. So first, let's take a general look at the bike's design and everything, like we usually do. Then we'll talk about the riding position and how the practical aspects feel. All right, let's go. Okay, here we go. Let's get started. We're going to take a closer look at the bike. First off, speaking of looks, this SRK 800, I think it's got a bit of style. It's definitely not the most original bike in the world. You can see some influences that remind us a little of the front end of a Z750. There's a bit of Kawa, a bit of Honda mixed in there, a touch of Ducati Street Fighter, but overall, it's got a really strong presence in terms of looks, especially when it comes to the choice of materials and everything. The bike is really well put together. There are even some little details that I personally really appreciate. Like, for example, check out this stock exhaust right here. It's clearly branded CFMoto and it looks really nice. It kind of reminds you of Acro exhaust cans, you know? So those little details look really good, like the heat shields here on the exhaust, a bit perforated with some nice touches. It's not exactly a showstopper, as the saying goes. We're not talking about the looks of a 921, which is super flashy. You'll see later that this really shows up in the pricing too, but still, it's solid. We're dealing with quality materials that really feel well made and serious. Same goes for the grips here. The only thing that gives away the slightly more entry-level side of the bike, I'd say, are the controls, which feel a bit less high-end. But even here, the handlebar is really nice, with the material that feels great. It's a pretty solid, high-quality metal. There's also a really nice display, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Same here with the seat. You've got little decorative stitches and thoughtful details like that, which look pretty nice. The fender is fairly standard, but with little patterns like this, it's not just plain and basic. Even though, as you'll see in a moment, the price of the bike is really unbelievable. And then we'll take a look at how it feels when you're sitting on it. The practical side, you could say. But already, just from an aesthetic point of view, it really works. I think it's a bike that looks pretty big. It really gives off a premium vibe. It's a bike that's compatible with the A2 license, and honestly, I think it really stands out. It really does. It's got something about it. It's not as skinny as, say, an MT-07 or a Z650. Personally, I prefer bikes like this over those super slim ballerina types. That's just not really my thing. This is more my style. And the colors, by the way, are also really well done. The black and gold, of course, immediately reminds you a bit of the CB1000 RNSP for the more recent bikes, but it's a good example, a good reference point. So personally, I'm not going to complain, and I think this bike still has enough character for you to really recognize it at that level. Let's talk a little bit about the practical aspects, so to speak. The bike has a seat height of 815 millimeters, which isn't excessive. It's about average, let's say. That'll allow most riders to be able to get on the bike. I'm 6'2" and my knees are bent. When my feet are flat on the ground, my knees are really bent. So you got plenty of room if you're taller than about 5'5" or 5'7". At 5'5", you might be on your tiptoes. At 5'7", well, you should start to be pretty comfortable. And then, if you're shorter, maybe there are tools or things that can help you lower it a bit. I haven't really looked into that too much. One extremely important thing, and I'll mention this several times in the video. If you're interested or want to check out the QJ-Motor lineup, especially this SRK 800 Dark, there's a link in the comments and in the video description. I really want to stress that you play along and use that link. It's super important. This lets us, together with SIMA, track how many people might be interested in the bike. People who might want to check it out, not necessarily buy it, but at least discover it. So I'm counting on you. It's the easiest thing you can do. In the pinned comment of the video and in the description, you'll find the direct link to the QJ-Motor website, where you can check out more details about this 800 Dark. That is, if you still need it after the review I'm about to give you. Anyway, so as for the riding position, my knees are a little bent. Not too much, but I've ridden the bike for a bit. If you're tall, you definitely feel it a little. The riding position is meant to be a bit sporty, a little less relaxed than what you'd get on something like a Hornet 750 or an MT-07. It's not bothersome at all in my opinion, but that's just the bike's DNA. What? Same goes for the handlebars. You're not sitting upright, you're just a little bit leaned forward. There's no pressure on your wrists or back, it's comfortable, but you really get that feeling of being one with the bike and ready to push it, like you're in attack mode. Personally, I think it's really good. As for the gas tank, it's 17.5 liters to be exact, which is actually pretty decent, especially since the bike's fuel consumption is around 6 liters per 100 kilometers. So that's about what you'll get, which means you should be able to get close to 300 kilometers of range. That's really not bad at all. And then, one last little thing, the small mirrors are actually pretty good. They do vibrate at certain times. Same goes for the practical side. When you're riding at certain RPMs, there's a bit of vibration on the bike, but nothing bothersome. And honestly, it's kind of part of the bike's DNA, you could say. So on that front, I don't have much to say. Let's move on to the tech part, because I want to show you the screen, which honestly is pretty cool. So the little screen on this SRK 800, actually before that, I wanted to show you something. It's this key. This key, what QJ-Motor did here is really original. It's actually pretty nice. You see other keys like this, but not one's as slim as this one. So it's a retractable key, as you can see. There we go. I'm trying to do it one-handed, but it's not easy. There, you can open it like this, retract it. So that's pretty cool. The problem with this, in my opinion, is that it's fragile. Since there's quite a bit of leverage at this point on something so thin, I recommend being careful, because if you force it, it might not hold up well. The screen on this little QJ-Motor SRK 800, can you see it clearly? Because right now, the sun is shining right in my face. I'll try to move to the other side to block the sun for you a bit. So we have a pretty nice TFT screen with 2 possible display modes. Look, I'm going to go into the menu and show you power mode, Bluetooth, tire pressure, instrument theme. Let's go into that. And you also have the day mode, so it's directly white here. So we have all the information we need. You can scroll like this, trip A, trip B, the total. Fuel consumption isn't shown, though it might be in the menu. We still have the temperature and fuel gauge. It's a modern, well-equipped machine. In terms of technology, this machine is the 800 Dark. So it's a bike that's less advanced than the standard 800. The 2 things that are different are the throttle. Here, it's a cable throttle. You'll see later in the riding section, it has a small consequence that I'll mention to you. And it only has an upshifter, not a down. As for the power modes, because we have this throttle and it's the 800 Dark, we only have 2 power modes, Sport and Standard. And you can only change them when you're stopped. Otherwise, you have ABS, traction control, Bluetooth, and direct tire pressure monitoring. So that's nice. Plus the standard features. Here you can see the tire pressure, shown here. That's rare enough that it's worth mentioning. So overall, the equipment on this bike is actually pretty decent. So what I suggest is that we go take it for a little ride now, and then we'll do a debrief to talk a bit about the price and the competition. You'll see, there are quite a few interesting things to talk about. Let's start the dynamic test ride of this CFMoto SRK 800 Dark. I'm glad, especially since it's been a long time since our last test ride. And like I mentioned during the static review, actually, this is the first bike I picked up. I really wanted to put the SRK 921 test ride first in the lineup because it's the powerhouse, and in my opinion, it's the bike that's really likely to win over a lot of people to CFMoto and show off the strength of the Chinese manufacturer. But this one, the 800 Dark, is actually the first one I picked up at Horse Motors, the dealership in Pirelli, which also handles CFMoto's press fleet. So I'm getting back on the road, talking and doing my first test rides on this bike. Now, let's get back to business and talk about this little CFMoto SRK 800 Dark. This is a bike we've already talked about while it was standing still, and we shared a bit about how it feels to sit on it. So far, I haven't ridden this bike much at all. I brought it back from Pirelli, took it for a short ride, but otherwise, right now I'm still sharing my first impressions with you and discovering it as I go. It's a bike that's really pleasant to handle and maneuver. We'll talk about that point a bit more later, but it's true that this is a motorcycle that feels extremely easy to get the hang of. I wouldn't say it's like a Honda, where that's really taken to the extreme, but we're definitely dealing with a bike that makes you feel comfortable as soon as you get on. I don't feel too cramped, not too uncomfortable. The seat, as I mentioned, is brand new, but it's not going to be the most comfortable in the world either. This isn't a bike that's meant for riding from Paris to Marseille and getting off feeling fresh as a daisy. But aside from that, I'm really comfortably settled. And there's something I really wanted to highlight because it's important. The gearbox on this bike is incredibly smooth. Whether you're using the up-only quick shifter on this bike or shifting manually, it's a real pleasure to go through the gears, to click through them, because honestly, it's smooth as butter. It's just like butter, isn't butter? That reminds me, because I was in Normandy not long ago. Isn't butter? It's really nice, and honestly, this is a bike that's just a joy to ride. A little less so when it comes to the throttle. I'll talk more about that in the engine section. But sometimes the bike has a slightly annoying tendency to jerk, and I think that's partly because we're dealing with a cable throttle and not a ride-by-wire system, which makes it a bit trickier when you're trying to be precise with it. So sometimes the bike has these little jolts. But overall, when you're riding like this, just cruising along, it handles really well. The controls are right where you need them, and the screen is very easy to read, even when the lighting conditions are good. Because today, we finally have weather that's more or less decent. So that's cool. So in terms of overall handling, when you get on it, you really feel good. The steering angle, let me mention it quickly. It's a bit limited. That is, we're really dealing with a bike that has a pretty tight turning radius. That's something to keep in mind. It kind of brings out that Italian engine DNA. But it's true that this isn't the easiest bike to make a U-turn with in the city. Other than that though, it really works well for getting around in city traffic. And now, let's talk about the engine, because this engine is really interesting. First of all, it's not very common in this category of bikes, in entry-level mid-size roadsters, since we're talking about an 800cc inline 4-cylinder that puts out 95 horsepower. So the only inline 4-cylinder that's really present in this range of bikes right now, in my opinion, is the one in the Honda CB650R, which is a really nice engine, but it does have a bit of a tendency to be, well, a little bit boring. Let's just call it like it is. It's an engine that doesn't have much life at low revs. It really comes alive at the top end. When we're talking about bikes that are also adapted for A2 licenses, well, obviously they're going to be a bit limited and restricted. So it's not necessarily the most fun thing out there. I'm just going to switch the bike to sport mode right away so I can give you my impressions in the most aggressive mode. But it is absolutely true that in actual fact, it is not the standard engine from the CB650R that is the most impressive part of this machine. Whereas right here, let me tell you something very important. We are dealing with something that is actually quite different from what you might expect, and quite honestly, it is also incredibly stylish and well designed in every single detail. Because already, the sound, you've been hearing it for a while now. I hope my new equipment is picking up the exhaust sound well, because I have to admit, I'm using a new setup, so I hope it does it justice. But this incredible engine right here, it really has a massive amount of character, and it is just super cool. And not only does it have a ton of punch at low revs, Because honestly, even when you go for the lower RPMs, it works absolutely great, but it also really sings with a beautiful little melody, a unique sound that is just so incredibly satisfying to hear. It's super enjoyable, and honestly, this engine is extremely pleasant. It really feels good. Let's try to see what happens if we push it a bit and shift into second gear, like this. Look. All right, here we go. Here we go. Shifting into second. 2000. So yeah, what I was telling you about the jerks, especially in sport mode, is that if you don't control the throttle with absolute precision, you can get some little jolts. Kind of like, you know, the 2014 MT-09 in A mode, when at the very beginning, the MT-09 had those little throttle response issues. So let's take a look. It's really, really, really cool. And the sound on top of that is aggressive. I'm losing the GoPro. I don't know if it's starting to shift. Yeah, this is where it starts to move. Yeah, I feel like this is where it shifts. All right, I'm still here, don't worry. I'll tighten it up right after this. This thing really, really works great. It's super, super enjoyable. It's got good power at every level. It's not a kick in the butt, not like a twin cylinder. You know, like the NK800, where at low revs it just gives you a jolt. On the other hand, it actually has this kind of steady pull all the way through the rev range, which is really pleasant. Kind of like these fields of canola we're seeing right now. See, that's really nice. Well, that's kind of like the engine on the SRK 800 Dark. It's kind of like a canola field stretching out to infinity. And here, you get that same feeling. It just keeps giving and giving. So this little engine is incredibly smooth and pleasant to drive. When you get into the city like this, exactly like that old familiar song goes, you do tend to be sitting pretty high in the revs while in second gear. Despite the speed, you're pretty high in the revs. You'll be significantly more comfortable and quiet in third gear, where the engine will be a bit more relaxed, because it's true that in second, you tend to be a little high in the rev range, and that's not exactly the most relaxing experience for the driver. But otherwise, it really shows smoothness and a certain voluptuousness. And actually, this little issue with jerking when you hit the accelerator, it's really, really noticeable in sport mode, and a bit less so in standard mode. And like I was saying, that's one of the differences between the standard SRK 800 and the SRK 800 Dark, which is less expensive. Among other things, we have a cable throttle, which I think might be calibrated a bit aggressively. And as a result, it tends to be a little harsh. If you're not careful, if you're not really precise with the throttle control, every now and then it can just, take off. But it's not, yeah. For me, for example, that's actually a good thing. I like bikes like that, where you twist the throttle and bam, it just smacks you in the face. I really like that. All right, let's take another look. Honestly, it's really enjoyable. Really, really enjoyable, with the sound is just awesome. You can really feel that aggressive side, that aggressive four-cylinder vibe. It's really, really cool. It's honestly super cool. So I find myself instinctively wanting to downshift, even though there's actually no downshifter at all on this bike. So you really need to be careful. Oh yeah, really, really, it's a super, super fun engine. Really fun. It has nothing to be ashamed of. So first off, it definitely doesn't have to be ashamed compared to the CB650R, because this engine is actually more exciting than that one. It's honestly way more throw-in. It's less manageable, less smooth, less like what I'm used to. I feel like I've known it for decades, but honestly, it runs really, really well, and it has real character. And that original factory exhaust sound, well, it's honestly pretty incredible. Yeah, you get a nice little pop every time you shift gears with the quick shifter. It really works super well and feels smooth. Well, listen, honestly, I'm pretty convinced by this engine. I think it has some great qualities. It's not necessarily my favorite type of engine. With this kind of bike, I'm a bit more of a fan of 3-cylinders or twins, because they tend to have a bit more torque lower down. But on the other hand, it's true that the character of this SRK 800 Dark is definitely there. And we'll talk about that in the conclusion and pricing section. Honestly, that's a tough one to beat, really. Anyway, we're going to talk about the chassis in just a moment. We'll meet back here. Don't go anywhere. Stay right where you are. Stay where you are. You're nice and comfortable. We'll be back in just a few moments. Well, for once, friends, I'm going to have to do this little part about the chassis of the SRK 800 Dark as a voiceover simply because my microphone gave out on me in the middle of filming. I apologize for that, but it won't stop me from giving you all the information you might need about the bike. So this 800 Dark, unlike the SRK 921, uses solutions that are a bit less premium, but that also matches the bike's price positioning. So in terms of the frame, we're looking at a steel chassis with a bike that weighs 206 kilos fully fueled. So obviously, compared to some of the heavyweights in the category, like the MT-07, the Z650, or even the Hornet 750, we're dealing with a bike that's fundamentally heavier. Nevertheless, when you're riding in the city at low speeds, you quickly realize that the bike really does a great job. It's well balanced, easy to handle, and at no point did I ever feel challenged by its weight. In fact, I actually kind of prefer it because it gives me a bit more of a feeling of stability on the bike. We'll talk more about that when I show you some footage of me taking a few turns. And then, what's really interesting about this 800 Dark and what makes it super competitive is everything else about the chassis. Namely, when it comes to the front and rear suspension, we have components that are fully adjustable, both the fork and the monoshock. Everything can be adjusted in every possible way. Plus, we have Brembo calipers with a radial master cylinder. That's really something that's extremely rare in this category of bikes. And you'll see later, when I talk about the price, that it makes it even more exceptional. And with this bike, as soon as you start having a bit of fun on some curves, you realize that even if it's not on the level of a super sharp sport bike or a hyper naked, it still delivers a lot of satisfaction. It's very confidence-inspiring when leaning into corners and really easy to maneuver. It's really not a bike that's going to put you in a tough spot. And in that way, I find it has a bit of that Honda spirit. It's kind of like what I mentioned about the engine, where everything about shifting gears and the engine's behavior, aside from its pretty cool sound, immediately inspires confidence. Well, here I find a bit of that same philosophy, with a bike that's really easy to handle, that doesn't have any reactions that are abrupt or that could be stressful. And so this really works extremely well. The balance is really well struck. I also find that the fork absorbs the bumps in the road quite well, unlike the SRK 921, which was clearly positioned as much more racing-oriented, much sportier. Here, this 800 Dark will definitely be kinder to the rider's backside. And as for the braking, well, I have to admit, it's also extremely good, because the bike responds really well when you use it. The radial master cylinder gives you excellent control, and the Brembo calipers, which are M4.32, something that's extremely rare in this class of bikes, work wonderfully well. The braking is strong, powerful, and easy to modulate, all on a bike that, as you'll see in a moment, is offered at a price that absolutely beats all the competition. So those are a few of my thoughts on the chassis of the Z800 Dark. I apologize for not being able to give you direct audio of the engine and exhaust this time. That'll be fixed for next time. Don't worry. And now, let's talk about the price and the competition for this bike. So, as I suspected, CFMoto isn't a brand that's just here to make up the numbers. I haven't had the chance to test the 921 yet, even though you guys saw the video first. It's a bike I got my hands on afterward. But with this 800 Dark, everything I thought about it has already been confirmed. Namely, it's an incredibly good value for what the bike offers. We're not talking about the most high-tech bike in the world, it's not the most advanced or the best finished bike out there, but it's something that right from the start is more than enough for the vast majority of riders. Riders who want a stylish machine with character and just enough technology so they don't have to worry. And where it gets really interesting is that this bike is offered at 6,799 euros. 6,800 euros for a mid-size Roadster that's really well equipped, with one of the highest power outputs in its class and a chassis that's honestly extremely impressive. So how does that compare to the competition? I'm going to tell you about 3 bikes that are kind of stars in this category, or a little less so for one of them, but that are really making a name for themselves. The first one is the MT-07. The MT-07 is a bike that has completely evolved very recently. I did a review on it, and it's become much more interesting than it used to be. I've always thought that the old version of the MT-07 really needed an update. It had a standard fork, axial calipers. It was a bike that needed to evolve. It's changed a lot, a whole lot. It has some really interesting features going for it. The MT-07 is a bike that's light, lively, has some tech. You can even get the YMT on it. It really got a nice facelift. However, it's noticeably more expensive than this bike. The chassis is slightly less refined, particularly the fork, calipers, and overall braking. On this bike, we're handling a sportier ride. We're aiming for a higher goal, bigger ambition, and a much higher price point. This machine is noticeably more expensive. Depending on the model, it can cost 1,000 or even over 1,000 euros more than the SRK 800 Dark. Decide between these 2 options, as their engine characters differ. The CP2 is a less powerful twin, 20 horsepower less, which is worth noting. Then there's the Hornet 750. The Hornet 750 was the best-selling motorcycle in France in 2023, still an absolute bestseller and an incredible bike. A twin-cylinder with 90 horsepower, packed with tech, and a look that's got a real manga vibe at its core. So again, this one is also really interesting. Its price rose slightly. It cost 7,800 euros at launch. That's still 1,000 euros more. Once again, more expensive than this bike. And I still believe that in terms of chassis, the SRK 800 Dark performs better. So once again, you're looking at something that I think is still a really great value, with a bike that has a look that's a bit more impressive and imposing. Some people like that, some don't. It depends on personal taste. Personally, I think that overall, it still has a slight edge, even though the Hornet 750 is still an absolutely fantastic bike. I'm not gonna say otherwise. The last bike I think we obviously have to mention is the 800 NK from CFMoto. Here again, we have an option that's also super interesting, and you know how much I love this bike. We're looking at prices that are potentially a bit more competitive in terms of value for money, because an 800 NK is still a bike that's really well equipped with the 790 engine, a super cool character, and lots of technology, especially in the advanced version, but it's still the same story. If you're looking for the absolute best value for money with a bike that's really gonna give you the most for every euro you spend, in my opinion, the 800 Dark is still an excellent alternative, because at 6,800 euros, we're almost in the price range of 300 or 400cc bikes that some manufacturers might offer. Whereas here you have an 800cc bike with 95 horsepower, Brembo calipers, and master cylinder. So is the SRK 800 Dark a perfect bike? Absolutely not. It has some teething problems, design issues with the throttle, like those little injection jolts that not everyone would like, and the controls aren't the best finished. You can still feel a bit of the brand's inexperience. There are also some small vibrations in the bike, but when you consider the price compared to everything it offers, I think it becomes really hard to beat. And right now, I'm debating in my head whether the best value for money in the industry is this bike or the 921, because that one is obviously much more expensive, but it offers a completely different level of performance. But in its segment, I really don't think you could beat it. And if you want something different, honestly, an 800 Dark could be super interesting. Just a reminder, if you're interested in the bike or want more information about it, check out the link in the description or the pinned comment. That way, it also lets us show SIMA and CFMoto that, look, we have good stats and people are interested. That's also how I'll be able to bring you more videos like this one. But only if you're actually interested, of course. Don't go clicking on the links if you're not interested. And so, we've reached the end of this second video for you. My very first videos about CFMoto. And honestly, I really think it's a brand that's super interesting in its approach. In my opinion, maybe even the biggest threat to CFMoto. Zantes and Vosges are brands that are very interesting and well established, but the momentum, drive, and lineup that CFMoto is developing are, in my opinion, much more intimidating. 225% growth in 2025. We are still in 18th place, not even in the top 10. But if they repeat that feat in 2026, things will intensify quickly, and we might see CFMoto as one of the main manufacturers in just a few years. All right, that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That's the best support you can give me. In the meantime, friends, we'll catch up very soon with more content, because right now, I'm going to test the SRK 921. There might even be a third QJ motor coming later on if the stats are good, if things went well, if SIMA's happy. So that all depends on you. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and enjoy your bikes. See ya!